Hey everyone, it's Sammy from Push Square, and for the past few days I've been playing around with the PS4 Pro, which is Sony's new supercharged system. But should you consider buying it? Well, I'm going to address that question in this video, so watch on for my full review. The PS4 Pro is an interesting prospect. If you think about the existing PS4 as kind of a Victoria sandwich cake, then the PS4 Pro represents the icing and cherry on the top. It doesn't change games fundamentally, but what it does is boost them to the next level by increasing resolutions and enhancing performance. And yes, I have been thinking about that analogy all week. So Sony's marketing the PS4 Pro as the world's first 4K console, and what you end up with is existing PlayStation 4 titles like The Last of Us Remastered, like Uncharted 4 and like Ratchet & Clank running at a much higher resolution, and this really increases the visual fidelity and the clarity of the games. Now there's been a lot of talk about not every game on the PS4 Pro running at native 4K, but actually Sony is using a technique in many games called Checkerboard Rendering, and what this is a kind of really good upscaling technique, and the image quality as a result is very comparable to native 4K. Now while you'll see a lot of criticism around the web about this technique, the reality is that it's very difficult to tell the difference between native 4K and checkerboard rendered 4K, and the reason for this is twofold. Number one, the technique that Sony's using is very clever and really does a very good job at kind of convincing you that what you're seeing is native 4K. But the other reason is that when you get to 4K televisions, the pixel density is so high that the resolution doesn't matter as much. When you compare sort of 900p to 1080p, you can sort of see the difference if you really look for it, but the difference between checkerboard rendered 4K and native 4K isn't as high, and so Sony's been really smart here in recognizing that, and what you get is really good image quality on the PS4 Pro that looks exceptional on a 4K television. But Sony hasn't just been touting 4K resolution, it's also been talking about high dynamic range in conjunction with the PS4 Pro, and what HDR does when it's switched on in compatible games is basically increase the contrast and the brightness of the image, and this results in colours appearing more natural, in the difference between light and dark scenes being that bit more pronounced, and it really does change the game. Titles like The Last of Us, which obviously originally released on the PS3, look like brand new games in 4K with HDR enabled by the PS4 Pro, and this is a really game-changing thing in terms of image quality, but you do need a compatible TV to make the most of it. The problem is that HDR is a bit of a mess at the moment. Some televisions do it better than others, and the other thing is that you don't actually need the PS4 Pro to take advantage of HDR. Sony's patched that into all existing consoles, but I think when you're running on a top-end TV with 4K enabled and HDR, you're going to get so much more out of your PS4 games, and that's what Sony's really aiming for here with the PS4 Pro. But obviously not everybody is looking to upgrade their TV, and one of the biggest questions about the PS4 Pro has been, what does it offer for 1080p TV owners? And the first answer is quite obvious. Games that have been updated to support the PS4 Pro almost all run at a higher resolution, and when you play these on a 1080p TV, the game is basically rendered out at that higher resolution and then shrunk back down to 1080p, and what this results in is much sharper, much clearer image quality. It's not instantly noticeable like it would be in 4K with HDR, but those of you that are very particular about graphic quality and don't like jaggies or shimmering or any artifacting like that are really going to appreciate what PS4 Pro brings to 1080p TVs. But there are a handful of titles that have been updated for the PS4 Pro with 1080p televisions specifically in mind, and one of those games is Rise of the Tomb Raider, which allows you to select between two different graphical options specifically for 1080p TVs. You can choose either enriched visuals, which basically turns up all of the visual effects and improves the physics of Lara's hair but sticks to 30 frames per second, or you can choose enhanced performance, which makes the game run at close to 60 frames per second. And Infamous Second Son does a similar thing. You can choose a higher frame rate, or you can choose that sharper image quality. And this is something that I personally hope more developers are going to take advantage of moving forwards. It's really easy to toggle between the different modes, and obviously each player will have different needs about what they prefer, whether it's frame rate or whether it's graphical fidelity, and it just makes sense to allow PS4 Pro owners to pick their preference in-game. But this flags one of the major issues with the PS4 Pro in that there's a lot of inconsistency on a game-by-game basis. A title like Uncharted 4, for example, simply increases the resolution and doesn't do a lot else with it, whereas Rise of the Tomb Raider, like I've just mentioned, has multiple options for you to take advantage of. And because a game needs to be patched to utilise the additional processing power of the PS4 Pro, it means there's a lot of the PS4 software library, like The Witcher 3, like Bloodborne, like Batman Arkham Knight, that currently don't take advantage of the hardware. And Sony has been smart to do this, I think, in a way, because it needs to maintain compatibility with the entirety of the PS4's library. But it's a shame that you buy a supercharged piece of hardware and you want to play your favourite game, say it's Dark Souls 3, and you're going to see no improvements from it until it's patched. That said, there are a lot of developers that are updating their games for the PS4 Pro, and some of these are PlayStation VR developers. So I've been checking out virtual reality on the PS4 Pro with games like Battlezone and Robinson the Journey, and the improvements are substantial. In Battlezone, for example, the developer is rendering the game at a higher resolution and then shrinking it back down to the headset's native resolution, which results in a much sharper image quality than you get on a normal PS4, and it's also increasing lighting effects and adding little bells and whistles like that, which results in a much more immersive experience. And it's a similar thing with Robinson the Journey, which is the best looking PlayStation VR title to date, without question. That game looks incredible with lots of foliage, and the image quality is very sharp through the PS4 Pro, which is a great advantage. Now obviously the PlayStation VR hardware is locked, so you can't increase the native resolution of the headset because the lens and the screen is what it is. But by super sampling, similar to what happens on a 1080p screen, you get much sharper image quality, and it does improve things noticeably in PlayStation VR. And just a quick word about the hardware itself. I actually really like the look of the PS4 Pro itself. I like that triple layer sandwich design that Sony's gone for. It's quite minimal, but it also feels quite premium. The size of the console is big, but it's not overly big, and the weight is heavy, but in a way that makes it feel premium. There are some great improvements to the unit itself. For example, there's now a USB port on the back as well as two on the front, and this is great for PlayStation VR owners because it means you no longer have to have cables coming around the front and the back of the unit itself. The one thing I will say that's a negative about the PS4 Pro hardware is the power and eject buttons, which are flush to the plastic, hard to see. They have no spring to them, and it feels like you're just going to snap the plastic of the console when you press them. So that's definitely a design flaw. It's also worth mentioning that there's no 4K Blu-ray in the PS4 Pro, though it does support 4K Netflix streaming and Amazon Prime 4K, and I'm sure many other services in the future. But if you're the kind of person that likes to buy movies on physical media, then that's a big disappointment, I'm sure. And I guess I should touch upon the fan noise, because this is always such a common question about new hardware. My experience thus far has been that the PS4 Pro is the quietest PlayStation 4 that I've owned to date. It's inaudible when you're running a game off the hard drive, but it does kick up a little bit in volume when you start installing a game off the Blu-ray. But what I've found is that my PS4 Slim is much louder when installing a game off a Blu-ray than my PS4 Pro is. So while I've seen reports from Digital Foundry saying the opposite of that, I can only tell you what I've experienced experience myself, and to be honest, this suggests to me that your mileage may vary depending on the build quality of the unit that you actually get, which is a bit of a shame, to be honest. So to conclude, I actually really like the PS4 Pro, and having spent a lot of time with the system now, I actually understand better what Sony set out to achieve, and I think it's realised its vision quite well. The PlayStation 4 Pro doesn't fundamentally change the core PS4 experience. What it does instead is layer bells and whistles on the top. And I think if you haven't bought a PS4 yet, you should probably stump up for the PS4 Pro right away, because it's not a whole lot more expensive than the PS4 Slim, but it does a lot more. It's also a no-brainer if you've got a 4K television with HDR, or you're a big fan of PlayStation VR. The trickier question is if you want to stick with a 1080p TV and you've already got a PS4, is it worth the upgrade? Well, if games like Rise of the Tomb Raider and Infamous Second Son keep releasing with options for 1080p TV owners, then it's definitely going to be worth the upgrade. But even if they don't, I think if you're the kind of person that appreciates sharper image quality and wants the absolute best PlayStation 4 experience, then you're probably going to want the PS4 Pro at some point. So yeah, I think Sony's done good here. I think that this is a good console, and it's the right way to do a mid-generation upgrade for an already successful piece of hardware. But let me know in the comment section whether you're going to buy the PS4 Pro at launch, whether you're going to wait, and what you think of the system overall. And thank you so much, as always, for watching.